Growing Together also looks after an orchard. We've talked about orchards. There's one called St Lawrence Orchard. St Lawrence Orchard, it's the remnant of 5 acres that the Peacock family got in 1920. It was a post-war Back to the Land initiative, and I think there were 13 plots. It was for non-commissioned officers, and it's obviously producing food locally. This is what they call a tree map. It's mapping all the original apple trees. They were planted after the First World War in 1914. Well, it's just after that, in 1920-22, they settled the land there and planted orchards. So it's more or less 100 years old. I think the Peacocks particularly were huge rhubarb growers, and they planted then Bramley apples and pollinators. Mostly BR means Bramley, and KOP is King of Pippins. It's those two, and I think there's Worcester Pearman. There's a pollinator, the King of Pippins. There's an old Cox. So there's a few originals. Bramleys are what sort of apple? Do you eat them, or do
you cook them?
Cook them. They're cookers, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There were some plums, but all their stuff was really for the cooking, and they supplied local markets. And I think there were tons and tons of rhubarb. Mrs. Peacock's son told me, it's phenomenal the amount of stuff that was produced, and I think they always had barrels outside their particular plot of windfalls, apples that were no good for market, so people always came and got some freebies. This is a collage gives you an idea of what the orchard is about and the trees.
That's impressive.
They planted what we call standard trees. They're very, very big. The previous ones probably grew 30 feet, so quite big, ladder work and all that. In the 50s, the next tranche of apples planted were half standards. After the Second World War, they planted half standards. The half standards were a bit smaller, you needed smaller ladders, and they were planted. And then we've been planting dwarfing and semi-dwarfing stock. And we, later, have planted semi-dwarfing and dwarfing. So a huge variety of apples. That one was severely damaged, that's why it's protected. But there's one over there, Keswick Codling, which we could go and pick. But we've put those, that's on dwarfing stock. So we've replanted it. I have got a map of all our plantings and everything. So there's quite a range of different apples. There's a couple of thousand different sorts of apples. Some Essex, because there's 33 Essex varieties of apples. Each county has got apples that were developed locally. There's 30 odd here, but in the world of apples, there's a book with all of them. But they're different colours, different shapes, right? Yeah, there's pear-shaped ones. Yeah. And technically you can have apples all the year round, so some will keep. So that was part of the idea. So we've got a mix there, and the whole orchard's been brought around by people from Growing Together going and working. And the last few years we've been celebrating with Apple Days as a national thing. It was introduced by Common Ground back in the 90s, I think, and it's sort of about what is particular about your locality, so that people identify locally, and locally produce food, that sort of thing. Where do apples come from? Where did they come from?
Trees.
They are, but where did the origins? Any of you heard of the Silk Road?
No, I've heard of Silk.
It's an ancient route from the east, more or less China, and it comes all the way through Asia, through Europe, and the main part of civilization then was around the Middle East. The wild apple, the original apple, was right out there in a place called Kyrgyzstan. right, underneath the Himalayas. And it is said that the wild apple's really sour and small and awful, but horses, humans and bears apparently kept trying. And when you eat an apple, what's the important bit that enables it to grow again?
Oh, the seeds.
The seed. The pip, yeah. Went into the ground and would grow. And gradually, the ones that people got to like were the sweeter ones. And they gradually moved into Europe. And now it's a traditional orchard. It's got quite a lot of flora come into it, so it's for biodiversity as well as apples. And that's why it looks a bit wild. But I think progressive orchardists now are actually, there's no bare earth, you just let things grow, and that's a better environment. And also the backdrop of having all sorts of different flora and the invertebrates actually balances stuff out, and you don't need to use chemicals. It's better for pollination. There's lots of advantages, and you're not poisoning anything.
So we used to spend a lot of time in that orchard, kind of, exploring and picking apples, and just we'd run music groups over there. We'd take the guitar and musical instruments, we'd play in the orchard and make music and stuff. So although we weren't directly involved with restoring it, we were involved with making use of it. So, and again, it's all about making that place available for people to use, and making it a productive place, that there's fruit there and all that kind of stuff. So,
my own way of growing, same as Graham's, is stock free. I don't use any animal products. I use dried seaweed because I feel that there's a lot of leaching and it all ends up in the sea, so the sea produces a harvest and we can bring it back to the land. I also use a push mower. I use a scythe. I've got into scything, using that as a method of looking after orchards, because I think machinery, you have to wear so much gear for good reasons, but you lose contact. When you're scything or using a sickle or hand tools, you're in contact. You know all the plants as you go through. You know the plants, and that's really important because the plants reflect the well-being of the soil. That place. It's like the orchard it had 6 quite important species. The bramble, nettle, cleavers. I forgot dock probably, but now it's got maybe I think 70 species of plants, and the invertebrates have grown inordinately, and that's come from not interfering chemically. Before it was chemically looked after, so it was very sterile and taken a long while for the soil to become alive again, and for all the bacteria and fungi. Fungi really, really important in orchards. They transfer of nutrients and things like that. The more we understand of soil science, the more that the less interference, no chemicals, that nature and all that in all its complexity and diversity balances stuff out. And it's understanding that, giving that a chance. And the way of observing it is by using hand methods, being directly in contact. We do use mowers to mow, but I don't like strimmers. They're awful, noisy. And I want people to experience that, begin to observe and see that sort of wealth of different species, invertebrates, all sorts. It's amazing over there. And that's you've seen it develop and evolve. And in the same way here, we've got all sorts of different habitats, and they all produce incredible species, invertebrates, all sorts of things. And here they do a little veg bag, and so it's locally produced, chemical-free produce. It's got to be good for